Hello friends and greetings for the day. Welcome back to another tutorial on ISTQB Advanced Level Test Analyst Certification. We are in Chapter 1 talking about the Test Analyst task in the test process and continuing ahead with 1.2, that is involvement in test activities. And today we shall be covering 1.2.3, the test implementation. And we would like to understand what a test analyst should be held responsible for when it comes to the test implementation. As a part of our foundation syllabus, we have discussed all about the implementation on a high level. Quickly to recall, implementation is about setting up the environment, preparing the data, prioritizing the test cases, working on the test procedures, also defining the test execution schedule, which is the final order of execution, and making sure we have written the automation scripts. And there are plenty of other minute things which we must be aware of from the foundation. If in case you need any help, I have linked something on the I button there. If you want, you can quickly go back to foundation if you want to cover them back again, just to recall. But here we will be anyways discussing them, right? So to deep dive, of course, a test analyst in the test analyst would be in the test implementation would be responsible for making sure that we are all set for the test execution, where there might be a lot of things to be done by the test analyst. For example, the TA may organize the test procedures and test scripts into test suites, or even suggest test cases for the automation. The reason why we don't do automation prior to this in the test design, because in test design, we are still trying to identify the required infrastructure and tools. And that is where we don't have the tools, so we cannot write the automation test scripts as a part of the test design. So as a part of the implementation, we look forward to do the automation, and defining the test procedure also requires carefully identifying any sort of constraints and dependency that may influence the test execution order. So in addition to the steps contained in the test cases, the test procedure includes steps for setting up any initial precondition, which would be like loading the test data from a repository or verifying expected result and post condition and resetting steps following execution. More of like the procedure when we talk about is more of like what are the sequence of action required in order to run a test. Now that could be a prerequisite, that could be about how to run the test, where to run the test, what kind of data would be pulled in, from where the source is, and what should happen as a post condition. That means after the execution, how should we reset the environment, or where should the test go back to? For example, at the end of the test of a login, we should also log out so that next iteration we are ready in the right state of the application. So these things would be defined as a part of procedure, and we will certainly follow this all together, right? And during the test as well, what kind of checkpoints or verification steps you're gonna have will all be defined as a procedure. Then the team implements in form of the automation scripts. Also to add here, of course, the test analyst prioritizes the test procedure and the test script for the execution based on the prioritization criteria earlier identified, that is during risk analysis or test planning, and identifying the test procedures or even test script that should be executed on the current version of the test objects. This also enables related test, which includes to be like new feature or regression testing, to be executed together in a specific test run. The test analyst finally updates the traceability between the bases and the testware, such as procedure, test script, and test suites, to that of where they belong. So more importantly, of course, we do look forward to prioritize everything. No matter you're talking about procedure, you're talking about test cases, you're talking about test suites. And for the reference, you can certainly make use of your risk-based testing, which we'll be covering in the next chapter in detail. But for now, just related that risk-based testing would be something which is helpful for doing your prioritization, where test analysts also make sure that everything is in place in order to do a smooth execution. And post execution, the reports should be meaningful, and thus we must have established the traceability. All your testware must have a link to their respective bases, that where do they belong? What does it cover once executed? Now, that certainly helps you to do a better reporting and letting someone know or other stakeholders know what testing has achieved by performing certain number of execution. So as in when you execute a test, using the traceability, you can let them know that this is what we have achieved so far. Well, To continue further, of course, we are talking about the other remaining activities. So TA can assist TM in defining the execution schedule, including resource allocation to enable efficient test execution by defining the test execution order. So test execution schedule is more of like a test execution order, which is finalized with priority and dependencies. Of course, you might have written the test cases in any order, but using priority and dependency, you may have revised the order of execution. For example, a test 1 can be dependent on test 3 for XYZ reason. And again, I'm not defining anything technically here, but just giving an example. Now, there's no way you can run T1 without running T3 because T3 is blocking T1. Now, again, if you need any help, go back to Foundation to quickly check it out that what we have discussed, we have taken examples and understood. So here, it will not be repeated again, right? Also to add, the TA creates input and environment data to load into the databases and the other repositories, and this data must be fit for purpose to support specific test objectives. So another activity, as we discussed, is about the test data preparation. So as a part of test design, you identify the data. As a part of implementation, you prepare the data and load it to the environment as well. Finally, you make sure that the data what you have selected is enough or the right data or valid data for using in the executions. Now here the valid does not mean we are only talking about positive data. Here the valid means representative data. That means right set of data used for right set of test cases, right? Because in case this mismatch happens, then certainly you might be using wrong data and you may have wrong predictions or more of like unexpected outcomes or invalid failures. Also to add, when we talk about the environments, certainly the TA should also verify that the test environment is fully set up and ready for test execution. Also, this is best carried out by designing and running a smoke test. The test environment should reveal defects in the test object through test execution, operate normally when failures do not occur, and adequately replicate, if required, the production or end user environment. So regarding the environment, things can be a little tricky at times because sometimes we do say that the test environment has to be as close as possible to the production. But it might not be necessary that you may have it as a like production because it might be very expensive to build. Depends on your product. For example, if your product is a web-based application, having an operating system running on a particular configuration would also be called as a production-like environment. But when you talk about automotive, aviation, medical electronics, or medical equipments, then the production environments are difficult to be recreated and it might be very expensive. So we say that it is always as close as possible to the production. And that is where we want to make sure that our environment is representative of that and parallelly it is up, available for the testers to perform the required execution when they need them. Finally, to talk about, of course, the level of detail and the associated complexity of the work carried out during the implementation certainly can be influenced by the level of detail of the test condition and test cases. In some cases, regulatory rules do apply and testware should provide evidence of compliance with applicable standards. Not to forget, there are certain products which do abide by certain compliances, standards, regulations. So it does not mean that your exercises, all the activities which you're conducting could be done without them. So if in case your project is following specific standards like ISO or IEEE, then you need to make sure that you're adhering, your test cases and test conditions are fulfilling those details and have every single information what you need in order to fulfill those expectations as well. So you may have to stick to those information while you are doing all the implementation activity and getting ready for your execution. So put together, a test analyst assures that the entire implementation phase is done well and supports the test manager in the required activities like prioritizing the test cases. So put together, that's all what we had from this particular tutorial team. Should you have anything else, feel free to comment below. I'm always there to address your queries and answer them well. Till then, keep learning, keep exploring, keep understanding the context. Thanks for watching the video team and happy learning.